All right, guys, I've got the thumbs up. We are green for go. Yeah. I don't want to blow the speakers out here. Well, welcome, everyone. It's an honor to be here with you all this evening. We do have a few announcements before we begin. Congratulations to George Dutton on meeting the requirements to become a United States Marine. George is home currently, and he's with us here tonight. He'll be home for a few weeks before leaving for infantry training, so make sure you stop by and see him before he leaves. We'll be packing Magi boxes in the basement after service this Sunday night. Everyone's help is needed. We will sign compassion cards on Sunday the 22nd after evening services. This is a change of date from what was listed in the bulletin, so be aware of that. Family night is this Monday, September 16th at 6:30 p.m. Our annual Friends and Family Day will be September 29th. We will have a potluck meal after morning services. Drinks will be provided. The World Bible School Benefit Dinner is scheduled for Thursday, October 10th, and there is a sign-up sheet in the foyer if you would like to attend. Please see the bulletin for more information. There is also a sign-up sheet in the foyer if you would like to host a Sunday evening recharge for the youth group. There's also a sign-up sheet in the foyer. There's a lot of sign-up sheet, guys, so make your way to the foyer when we leave here and just take a look at all of them and just see if any of them apply to you. And we would love for you guys to be able to come and join on that. So there's another sign-up sheet for the fall retreat for the youth group. So if you have any of the kids that qualify as youth group, we're going to have a good time with the fall retreat coming up on October 4th through the 6th. So please sign up there if you would like to attend or if you would like for your child to attend. They don't have to agree. As long as you put their name down, they can come. There's also, if you have not registered for the men's retreat and would like a t-shirt, the deadline is tonight. So please sign up for that, guys. That's going to be a great time for fellowship together. So please make some time to come together for the men's retreat. So if you want a t-shirt, the deadline to register is tonight. You can still register after tonight, just you will not receive a t-shirt. The backpack bags will be packed tonight downstairs. So after services, if you can come help make some circles, just pack some bags for the kids. I know that really helps them out. So tonight, the order of service, song leader this evening will be Brother David Carnes. Opening prayer will be by Brother Carter Koch. The devotional and adult class this evening will be by Brother Jay Wilkins. Next week's class will be by Brother Terry Gross. Brother David?
Using the book, this is 273. I know the Lord will find a way. This was my granny's favorite song. When I used to visit her on Sunday evenings, this is one of those songs. I know the Lord will find a way for me. I know the Lord will find a way for me. If I walk in heaven's light, shun the wrong into the right, I know the Lord will find a way for me. The Lord is sent to preach the word to all the world. The Lord is sent to preach the word to all the world. If I walk in heaven's light, shun the wrong into the right, I know the Lord will find a way for me. Won't it be grand to hear him say, well done? Won't it be grand to hear him say, well done? If I walk in heaven's light, shun the wrong and do the right, won't it be grand to hear him say, well done?
Please bow. Dear most gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for everything you've given us. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to come here tonight with each other and learn more about you and worship your name. Please be with us as we go through the rest of this week. And thank you for your only Son who died on the cross for our sins. In your Son's holy name, amen.
"26-year-old Heather Penny was one of the first female military aviators allowed to fly fighter planes. 2001, she was stationed at Andrews Air Force Base, 121st Air National Guard Unit. September 11th morning, when it was determined that Flight 93 had turned and was headed for the nation's capital, Penny and her squadron commander, Mark Sasseville, boarded F-16 fighter planes on a mission to intercept and put down Flight 93 before it could reach Washington, D.C. There were two problems with the mission. Number one, in 2001, there were only 5 military bases in the United States that had fighter planes armed and ready to defend the United States. Andrews Air Force Base was not one of those bases. So their F-16s were not armed. And knowing time was of the essence, they did not take time to put the missiles on their planes that they would be needed to take down an airliner. So en route to intercept Flight 93, SAS, as he was called, radioed to Penny and said, "I'm going to crash my plane into the cockpit. You do the same in the tail. We have to bring down this plane. There's no other options." Second problem with the mission was that because it took so much time for someone to give the okay for the mission, that by the time SAS and Penny took off from the ground, Flight 93 was already on the ground, crashed by heroic crew member or heroic passengers of that plane. What happened 23 years ago, I think, is worth for us remembering, and to remember those who lost their lives, those who sacrificed their lives trying to save others, those who many are still dying because of injuries and illnesses from that day. And so I think it's good to remember that. I'd like to read what Paul wrote in Romans chapter 5, starting in verse 7. "For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would even dare to die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since therefore we have now been justified by his blood, much more shall we be saved by him from the wrath of God. For if while we were enemies we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more now that we are reconciled shall we be saved by his life. More than that, we also rejoice in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have now received reconciliation." When Jesus died on the cross, he didn't die for a human life, he died for our immortal souls. Unfortunately, I imagine that many who perished 23 years ago today were not ready to see their God. I hope that all of us are. But if you're not, I challenge you to think about that this evening, to make whatever changes are necessary. If you're a Christian but are not practicing Christian life, you're not doing what you know to do, I hope you'll correct that. If you've never put on Jesus in baptism, become a child of God, we hope you'll think about that tonight as well. If there's anything we can do to help you with this, we invite you to come forward and talk to us while we stand and sing this song of encouragement.
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. Don't let go with me, I still will follow. Don't let go with me, I
All right, it's just us now. We're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 22 and 23 this evening. You want to turn there. We're going to do a lot of reading, particularly in chapter 22. If you'd like to get a Bible and follow along. We're about to end of our study of 2 Samuel. Next week will be our last chapter, with Terry wrapping up. And we're going to start a different study after that. But we've been mainly studying about David here the last few weeks. And when we were polishing the pulpit, there was a series on 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles that's been going on for several years, working through those books. And one session we were talking about really two of the better kings of Judah, Hezekiah and Josiah, one of the few good kings. And the thing that occurred to me as I was reading that was that David was the standard for being a good king. If you read about Hezekiah in 2 Kings 18, it says when he began to reign, he did things that were good, as had his father David. David wasn't his father, he was his ancestor, but David was a standard for being a good king. King Josiah, who was a boy when he started, very similar. He did all that was good, as had his father David. So David was a standard. And there were only 8 kings, I think 8 kings in Judah who were decent kings, all turned out not so good. Then in Israel, there were no good kings. Every one of them was an evil king. And so it's just interesting that David passes the reign on to Solomon. After Solomon, the kingdom is divided and all goes downhill. Eventually, God takes both kingdoms into captivity to kind of get their attention. So anyway, we're nearing the end of David. And we mentioned before that the events in 2 Samuel aren't necessarily in chronological order. Some things appear to have happened before, and so the writer's not necessarily trying to write just a history book by dates. And I think it's probably true of these chapter 22 and 23. I don't think they really are at the end of the story. I'll get into more of that in chapter 23. I definitely think that's not. But anyway, chapter 22 starts with David spoke to the Lord the words of this song. Chapter 22 is Psalm 18. So if you take 2 Samuel 22 and Psalm 18, you can read either one. It's the same thing. This is David's psalm, what we call Psalm 18. And it says, on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. And so, we've been talking about how Saul was pursuing David, trying to kill him. Other enemies, the Philistines. David was a warrior king, did a lot of battles, both within and without. His son, we talked about a week or two ago, Absalom tried to kill him. So David had a lot of battles, a lot of wars. And so it's hard to pin down the day that the Lord delivered him. I kind of suspect that this is David reflecting back when things are now safe and sort of combining all those things that happened, because the Lord always delivered David. Delivered from the hand of Saul, from the Philistines, from Absalom. David was always trusting God and delivered by God from his battle. So I suspect this is not one day, but a reflection on all the times that God had been good to David. So what I want to do is just read through this chapter, Psalm 18, whichever one you want to follow. And I'd like for you to think about, as we read this, maybe pick out some things that occur to you, because when I end, I'd like to ask you what things popped out to you that you think are significant here in this. So as we read through, be thinking about some things you might want to toss out to discuss a little bit more. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. My God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold and my refuge. My Savior, you save me from violence. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. For the ways of death encompassed me, the torments of destruction assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me, and the snares of death confronted me. In my distress I called upon the Lord, to my God I called. From his temple he heard my voice, and my cry came to his ears. Then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundations of the heavens trembled and quaked because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils, and devouring fire from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. He bowed the heavens and came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. He was seen on the wings of the wind. He made darkness around him his canopy, thick clouds, a gathering of water. Out of the brightness before him, coals of fire flamed forth. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice. And he sent out arrows and scattered them, lightning and routed them. Then the channels of the sea were seen. The foundations of the world were laid bare. At the rebuke of the Lord, at the blast of the breath of his nostrils, he sent from on high. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He rescued me from my strong enemy, from those who hated me, for they were too mighty for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a broad place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. The Lord dealt with me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanness of my hands, he rewarded me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all his rules were before me, and from his statutes I did not turn aside. I was blameless before him, and I kept myself from guilt. And the Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to my cleanness in his sight. With the merciful you show yourself merciful. With the blameless man you show yourself blameless. With the purified you deal purely, and with the crooked you make yourself seem torturous. You save a humble people, but your eyes are on the haughty to bring them down. For you are my lamp, O Lord, and my God lightens my darkness. For by you I can run against a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. This God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord proves true. He is a shield for all those who take refuge in him. For who is God but the Lord? And who is a rock except our God? This God is my strong refuge and has made my way blameless. He made my feet like the feet of a deer and set me secure on the heights. He trains my hands for war so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. You have given me the shield of your salvation, and your gentleness made me great. You gave a wide place for my steps under me, and my feet did not slip. I pursued my enemies and destroyed them, and did not turn back until they were consumed. I consumed them, I thrust them through, so that they did not rise. They fell under my feet. For you equipped me with strength for the battle. You made those who rise against me sink under me. You made my enemies turn their backs to me, those who hated me, and I destroyed them. They looked, but there was none to save. They cried to the Lord, but he did not answer them. I beat them fine as the dust of the earth. I crushed them and stamped them down like the mire of the streets. You delivered me from strife with my people. You kept me as the head of the nations. People whom I had not served me, whom I had not known, served me. Foreigners came cringing to me. As soon as they heard of me, they obeyed me. Foreigners lost heart and came trembling out of their fortresses. The Lord lives, and blessed be the rock, and exalted be my God, the rock of my salvation. The God who gave me vengeance and brought down peoples under me, who brought me out from the enemies. You exalted me above those who rose against me. You delivered me from men of violence. For this I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations, and sing praises to your name. Great salvation he brings to his king, and shows steadfast love to his anointed, to David and his offspring forever. What pops out to you in that? Yes, the history, yeah. Yep. Roger says he's kind of a history of his life. He's reflecting back on a lot of the battles and the issues he had with people trying to destroy him. What else? There's a couple songs in here. Right, that's the words of a song, particularly the young people say. Verse 4 is also, I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I shall be saved from my enemies. That's also a song, right? Worded a little bit differently. Right. I think that's a central theme. No matter what was going on, David always trusted in God. There's some poetic license here, I think, when David said he was blameless. Well, not totally right. David made some mistakes, some bad mistakes, but he never turned away from God. The problem with all the kings that are called evil is they turn away from God. They let idol worship, pagan worship. David never did that. Not that he kept all the laws. For some of the case, they were keeping the feast like Passover. I don't think they did that during that time. But still, David was always turning to God for strength and for direction, unlike a lot of the other kings. True. Everybody hear what Robert was saying? The other thing we get here I think is important is that David says the Lord rewards righteousness. David realizes that God was blessing him and taking care of him because he was trying to do what was right. But God didn't do that for a lot of the kings because they were not righteous. But David sees his righteousness in trying to do what was right in God's eyes is the reason God is with him. And he realizes that if he had turned away from God, God would have turned away from him, which is what happened to Saul, for example. And so I think that's another good point where if we're expecting God as a comforter, to deliver, or whatever word you want to use, we have to be faithful to God, right? I think that's a central theme in this psalm as well. What else, anybody? Okay, so chapter 23, if you have a Bible that has headings, mine says the last words of David. That's literally not true because David is still alive when we go into 1 Kings and says things. So I don't think this literally means the last words out of David's mouth. What I think this means is it's the last formal words that David, the last political speech, you might say, the last message he's given to the people, all right? And so, again, as Robert said, perhaps this is toward the end of David's life. He's reflecting, he's thinking about who's going to take over the kingdom when he's gone, and he's trying to set things in order, but he winds up probably not doing too well. I don't think he really prepared Solomon. Maybe Solomon wasn't paying attention. I don't know. Maybe David tried. So anyway, these few verses are almost like another psalm or proverb because it contains a lot of things that, again, are reflective, but also perhaps instructive for the future. So let's read these in chapter 23. Now these are the last words of David. The oracle of David, the son of Jesse, the oracle of the man who was raised on high, the anointed of God of Jacob, the sweet psalmist of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord speaks by me, his word is on my tongue. The God of Israel has spoken, the rock of Israel has said to me, when one rules justly over men, ruling in the fear of God, he dawns on them like the morning light, like the sun shining forth on a cloudless morning, like rain that makes grass to sprout from the earth. For does not my house stand so with God? For he has made me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and secured. For he will not cause to prosper, for will he not cause to prosper all my help and my desire? But worthless men are all like thorns that are thrown away, for they cannot be taken with the hand. But the man who touches them arms himself with iron and the shaft of the spear, and they are utterly consumed with fire. Again, let me ask you, what pops out in this to you? Some points. Yep, the Spirit of God speaks through me, right? The inspiration that David had, we think the Psalms are inspired, and perhaps he's saying specifically that these words are inspired. God is wanting him to get these words out. Again, he says that he's the man who is raised on high, appointed by God. So he realizes why he's in the position that he's in. Remember, David was not royalty, right? David was a nobody from a small no town out in the middle of nowhere. And so he wasn't from royal blood. And so David knows that he didn't get the throne by right of succession like most of the kings did. He got this because God specifically chose him, right? As an aside, why did God choose David? Because he was a man after his own heart, all right? Most of the kings did not fit that model, right? Right. Yeah, David for sure had a love for God. What else do you get out of this? Yeah, this is like a how-to, right? What in there, it looks like a how-to for the next king. I don't know if David knew at this time it was going to be Solomon. When you get into 1 Kings, there's a bit of a tussle going back and forth who's going to be made king. So I'm not sure at this point if David knew for sure it was going to be Solomon. He knew it was going to be one of his sons, I'm sure. But I'm not sure he knew it was Solomon yet. What do you see in here that's sort of a manual for the next king? What? Testing? Oh, justly. All right, yes. Yeah, verse 3, when one rules justly over men, all right? And he mentioned some metaphors here. It's like the dawn of light in the morning, the sun shining, all these metaphors. But essentially what he's saying is you have to rule justly. Why was the kingdom divided after Solomon? Because they did, yeah, Rehoboam did not rule justly, right? He said, well, if my father taxed you, I'm going to tax you a lot more than that. You think he was rough, I'm going to be a lot rougher. And the people rebelled against that, right? And 10 tribes headed out. And so this didn't get passed on, or at least didn't get adhered to. He also mentions the everlasting covenant there in verse 5. things went wrong with that because the kings got away from God. But in the end, what is that everlasting covenant? It's the church, right? Because the final king, Jesus, is from the lineage of David. So David's lineage, in the end, is the everlasting king. It just took a while and a lot of trouble to get there. Carl? Okay, a better covenant, right? Of course, David was living under the law of Moses, although they weren't keeping it very well. But he sort of was under that covenant. But there's an everlasting covenant coming that's even better. We read a lot about that comparison in Hebrews, comparison to the Old and New Testament. New Testament being so much better. I like the analogy in 6 and 7 that worthless men are like thorns. You can't take them up with a hand, right? You know, if you want to pick a rose stem, you can't go out barehanded and grab it, right? Because there's thorns on it. So what do you have to do? Right. Yeah, you have to protect your hands. And so I think the analogy here is worthless men may be referring back to all these people who had been against David, they had to deal with. And how do you deal with these worthless men? Well, like thorns, you have to have protection, iron, and spear. You can't just go out daintily and pick them with your hand. It just takes force to deal with them, which is what he did. So that's an interesting analogy. Anything on this section? His last words? No, I don't think that's what he's saying. He's saying, does not my house stand? So I think he's saying, yeah, the ESV says, okay. Look, in ESV, he's taking the analogy of what a justly ruled kingdom looks like. And in verse 5 it says, does not my house stand so with God? In other words, isn't that what I have done? That's the way they translated it. But, it's a rhetorical question for sure. Yeah. Okay, let's get into David's mighty men. This is an interesting study. First of all, I'm not going to read the list. If someone wants to read the list, have at it. There are names in here that are beyond pronunciation. The problem when you take Hebrew and Englishise those words by letter into English, it doesn't come out right? Because Hebrew is not pronounced like we would pronounce the letters that they stand for, all right? Yes. Yeah. True. That's what we're saying. In Hebrew, there are no vowels, it's only consonants. And so the way they pronounce things, to our ears, the vowels are there, the way they pronounce the consonants. So when we try to translate these into English, we stick vowels in there that we think go, but that may or not be right. The name David, for example, was probably not pronounced David, it's probably David in Hebrew. And so trying to pronounce these things is sort of an exercise in futility. Plus, if you did, it's probably not the way it was pronounced anyway. So I'm not going to try to do that. Carl? Okay, we're going to get there. All right. There are three mighty men that are apparently above all David's guys. David had a big army, but he had some people just like the special forces, right? The Army Rangers, the Navy SEALs. These were the elite soldiers that were with David, all right? The bodyguards, the main guys who really took care of David and took care of the military. And so he starts out with three men. So verse 8, these are the names of the mighty men whom David had. Josheb-Bas-Hebeth, a Takamonite. He was chief of the three. He wielded a spear against 800 whom he killed at one time. So one other thing to mention here is that the Tachmonite, or whatever that is usually one of two things. It's either where they're from, the area where they're from, or it's a family, like a clan name, all right? We would call it a last name. So a lot of these men are going to have a name tacked on. It could be their father's name, could be the family name, could be where they're from, as in the case, I think, the second guy, or the third guy. But these three guys were brutal. I don't know if this means he single-handedly killed 800 men at one time. If he did, that's the guy you don't want to mess with, right? This is a warrior. So it could have been that he was with his troop, whatever, and he was a leader. I'm not really sure what this means, but it's put there to emphasize what a great warrior this man was. Right? You have something else, Carl, on that? All right. All right. Next to him among the three mighty men was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, son of Ahoai. So you always want your father's name when your father's name is Dodo. Again, that probably wasn't his name. It's just how we do it. Eleazar is a common name. Remember, Aaron, one of Aaron's sons was Eleazar, and there was an Eleazar who was a priest. So this is kind of a common name in Israel. So that's perhaps why he tells us who his son was and who his grandfather was. So when we're talking about the right guy. He was with David when they defiled the Philistines, who were gathered there for battle, and the men of Israel withdrew. He rose and struck down the Philistines until his hand was weary, and his hand clung to his sword. And the Lord brought about a great victory that day, and the men returned after him only to strip the slain. Right? Again, that's kind of brutal. He says he was there when, on that day, the great victory, but I tried to go back and pin down what day was that, what battle was that. And there's so many instances where they were fighting the Philistines. I don't know if you can go back and say, okay, that's when they were at this place, and that's when this happened. So I'm not sure what battle he's referring to. If anyone else thinks you can pin that down, I'd be glad to hear your opinion. But again, pointing out what a mighty soldier, what a warrior he was. Verse 11, the next to him was Shammah, the son of Agi, the Hararite. I think Hararite means the hill country. It's the region he was from, is what I read. The Philistines gathered together at Lehi, where there was a plot of ground full of lentils, and the men fled from the Philistines, but he took his stand in the midst of the plot and defended it and struck down the Philistines, and the Lord worked a great victory. So here again, you get the idea that this man single-handedly won the battle. When everyone else was fleeing, he stood his ground and won the battle. So again, point out what a great warrior he was. So these are the three main men of the mighty men. But then we're going to get into a bunch of others. And this is where it gets a bit hard to follow. And 3 of the 30 chief men went down and came about harvest time to David at the cave of Adullam. But a band of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. David was with them in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then at Bethlehem. And David said longingly, "Oh, that someone would give me water to drink from the well of Bethlehem that is by the gate." Remember, David is from Bethlehem, so he's longing to have a drink of water from his hometown. Then the 3 mighty men broke through the camp of the Philistines, drew water out of the well of Bethlehem that was there by the gate, and carried and brought it to David. These are dedicated guys, right? When David says he's thirsty for water from this well, these 3 guys just go and get it, all right? And when it says they broke through the stronghold, I don't think that means they snuck in, all right? So what does David do? But he would not drink of it. He poured it out to the Lord and said, "Far be it from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Shall I drink the blood of the men who went at the risk of their lives?" Therefore he would not drink it. These things the 3 mighty men did. All right? Here again, another story of their impressive warrior accomplishments. So now we come to Benaiah. He's going to be the head of the bodyguard. And Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was a valiant man of Kabzeel, a doer of great deeds. He struck down 2 Ariels of Moab. I couldn't find out what the word Ariels means. It's not the Disney princess, I don't think. So I don't know if it means bands or armies. I couldn't find out what the meaning of that word was. He also went down and struck down a lion in a pit on a day when snow had fallen. And he struck down an Egyptian, a handsome man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, but Benaiah went down to him with a staff and snatched the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. These things did Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and won a name beside the 3 mighty men. He was renowned among the 30, but he did not attain to the 3. And David set him over his bodyguard. So here's another mighty warrior, but he was not as mighty as the first 3. I think I skipped over Abishai. Let me go back, verse 18. Now Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief of the 30, and he wielded his spear against 300 men and killed them and won a name beside the 3. He was the most renowned of the 30 and became their commander, but he did not attain to the 3. So here again, this Abishai, the brother of Joab. Joab's another commander we read about. I think they have another brother is going to show up in the next list. But the first 3 are still higher than them. No one is as great as those first 3, even though Abishai becomes the commander of the 30. And Benaiah becomes the commander of the king's personal bodyguard, right? So that is the description of the mighty men. So In verse 24 through the end of the chapter, there's a list of the 30 men. Except when you try to count, which is hard to do because there's so many names stacked in there, so-and-so, the son of, from, it's hard to sort the names out. But I think there are 34 names there, right? So the 30 men have a list of 34 names, right? Now, yeah, that's one possibility. The Big Ten, for example, has 18 teams now. We're getting overwhelmed with teams. Nobody else joined the Big Ten. We got plenty. We got 3 teams from the West Coast, but I don't know why. Anyway, that's one possibility, that the 30 was the name of the group, right? The 30 mighty men. What makes you think, in reading this list, if you had, that there were more than 30 men over the period of time? Anyone read the end of the list? Uriah the Hittite. Uriah the Hittite was Bathsheba's husband. We know he's been dead for a long time. That's way back several chapters ago. So one possibility is what Robert said, that the 30 is just a name for the group of these mighty men. The other possibility is that, as in the case of Uriah, when he was killed, they were down to 29, so they added another back to 30. There are other men who may have died, 29, 28, let's add more to get back to 30. So it's possible that it took 34 men to keep 30 men at this time. They were just like listing the honor roll. You would list the people who died as well because they were part of the group. So that's another possibility. Somebody has a hand up, Carl. I don't know that David is writing this. In 2 Samuel, it's probably not written by David. So I don't know that he actually penned the name Uriah the Hittite. That would be a tough one to do, right? Knowing what you did, to have to list him in your, I mean, he had remorse afterwards, but still, I don't know who compiled or wrote this list. Some of the ones here are mentioned more specifically. There's an armor bearer. In verse 32, it says, the sons of Jason. How many are sons? Is that 2 or 3 or 6? So it could have been more than 34 because I don't know what that refers to. It appears to be separate from the names before and after. And so that could be multiple people. So it's really hard to follow, to try to only list who the 30 are for the couple of reasons we've mentioned here. But anyway, these are special people because, as I said, David had quite an army. For instance, when Saul goes out to find David, he had an army of 3,000. So I assume that army even got bigger under David in their battles. So certainly the army wasn't composed of only 30 or so people. So the interesting thing is, at the end, he says 37 in all. These are the 30, 37 in all. So here again, I think the 30 probably is just the band of brothers, and it took some to fill in for casualties. That's my opinion. I don't know if you look down through the list, any names pop out as interesting? They have Jonathan. I don't think that's Jonathan, Saul's son, because he'd been killed in battle quite a bit before this. But I guess that's possible that he's named with him because of his closeness to David. True. You notice there are very few people named Jay, because I'm not a famous person, so people don't name their babies after me. Although if you want to, if anybody's expecting, you're welcome to use my name. I'm not. I'm named for my grandfather's initial. Right. His name was J. Everett, or his name was Everett J. My name is J. Everett. So now you know. Yeah, if it's the same Ahithophel. Yeah. Here again, a lot of these names are common. You find them in other places, so it's really hard to pin down the who's who. But it's interesting. Okay, what else? Anything else? We got 5 minutes left. Any pressing questions? Alrighty then. Brother Terry's going to wrap us up next week with the census, which is a bit confusing when you study that. Terry's going to make it crystal clear. All right, thanks for your comments. I appreciate your input for the lesson. You just hold tight until the bell rings so we don't disturb the little ones.